Welcome into a special bonus episode of Havlicek Stole the Pod. I am Justin Quinn. I am here with Ti Windisch of, let me see if I can be able to say this right. I hope I said your last name right. I should have asked.
You got the last name perfect. The first name is Ti, though. So that's
Ti.
Okay. Much on the last name. That's the thing. Yeah. But that's
we
fine.
were talking before we started about mispronouncing things because you've only read them, and
right.
Here goes. The name of his pod is the Gyro Step. If I'm pronouncing it in the Greek style, yes.
You pronounce it more correctly than I do, I think. Thank you. That was excellent.
Very cool. So the reason Ti is on is twofold. One of which Celtics fans got a nice close look at last night because, as you might have guessed, Gyro Step is all about a particular Greek freak and his team. We did not see him last night, but my co-host Alex was calling this a classic trap game beforehand, and boy, was it. So we'll be talking about that. But we also have a surprise announcement that I alluded to on our last podcast, which is that we have changed podcast networks. We are now on Blue Wire, which Ti has helped me join. So we wanted to have him come on and talk about the network itself and the other podcasts that you might find on it. What are some of the other NBA podcasts that we are now with?
Yeah, that is a great question. So, of course, first and foremost, welcome to you and Havlicek Stole the Pod. We're happy to have you. So, the great Gyro Step, my Milwaukee Bucks podcast. Maybe I'm biased, but I think that's one of the top ones, of course, across the network. But we have a really strong network of regional shows, which I think we work with some pro athletes and everything at Blue Wire too. That's kind of my day job, and I do the Bucks pod on the side. But I'll name off a few here. I hope I don't forget any. But we've got Light Years, Golden State Warriors podcast, Sixth Man Show, Orlando Magic, Setting the Pace, a great Pacers pod who had a lot of fun, last year. Green with Envy, another fellow Celtics pod. Yeah.
Oh, we know them. They're great.
They are. The Kings Beat, who, I don't know how some of these folks keep it going, but they cover the Sacramento Kings.
They have plenty to talk about.
Ramsey's. Yeah, they got plenty to talk. Well, yeah, it's not the most fun. Let's see. Knicks Fan TV, great Knicks show, of course. Dane Moore does an excellent job covering the Timberwolves. Miami Heat Beat, Cash Considerations, a Bulls podcast, which again, it was a fun first couple of weeks at least. The Timeline, who cover the Suns. Buzz Beat, who cover the Hornets, who, gosh, they try so hard, and that's a tough one. Same with Brooklyn Buzz, although they at least had a couple of years. And then the Uncontested and OKC Thunder pod, which I remember having so many conversations with those guys. Like, you just got to keep going. Like, it's going to be really hard to grow an audience right now when, you're tanking every year, but eventually it'll happen. And lo and behold, they are having more fun than anybody covering the NBA right now. We also have Sam Vecini, who does Game Theory, and then Dwight Howard, D'Angelo Russell, some other pros that we work with as well.
Very cool stuff. You should definitely check those out, particularly Game Theory. We are huge Game Theory fans on this podcast. Yeah. One of the things that sets this podcast apart is when we have a guest on, in accordance with the name, they steal the podcast for a moment. So I'm going to throw that to you, Ti. What are we talking about for a moment?
I will keep it basketball or at least sports focused. I thought about, going a totally random direction, but this has been on my mind a lot over the last couple of years. We need to take away all the extra jerseys. It's way too much. There should be a road jersey and a home jersey, and let's rename them back. This icon association thing is ridiculous. It's never going to catch on that the NBA does. No one on earth is like, oh, wow, it's the association whites. No, home, road. And then you can have like one extra jersey. You can have a bonus jersey. You want to swap it out every couple of years, fine. But this new, you got the two standard jerseys, then you have the icon, then you have the city edition, then you have the state. It's ridiculous. And it's terrible for fans because I don't want to buy these. Oh, it's really cool. They're never going to wear this again because they need to pump out two new ones every year because of Nike. So that's my steal is let's go back to the days. And I guess, maybe your listeners are like, we don't change our general ones ever. So, we don't see all that many different ones, but some of these teams, it's just like, it's way too much and they're just ridiculous. So that's my rant.
A lot of them are not good too, which is my main gripe. If they could
Yeah,
at least keep like light and dark for home and away, as has been the
right.
custom for my entire life, that would be nice. I don't
Everyone's life.
even,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't care if they are like I'm more open to you than you to having additional jerseys, but I don't want like 10 jerseys a season on the court. Like I would be very happy if, for example, instead of making the courts incredibly hard to look at in
yeah.
the
That's another
NBA
thing.
Cup,
Yeah,
then they could just have, if you want to have a funky jersey that you want people to buy and you want to like work together to kind of raise the awareness that you were looking at a cup event, that would be the venue, and just that, never anywhere
yeah,
else. And then I would
yeah.
understand, this is a cup. But yeah, there's too many jerseys. Like if they want to keep making them just to sell, the players don't have to wear them on the court. Like I understand the appeal, the sales value
Yeah,
of that, but it's dizzying sometimes because you see like Lakers jerseys that are like blue or like
yeah.
I don't know, like sometimes they pull it off, like like the city editions for the Heat. But I mean,
But
that can be
but
the
even when
one
they
you were talking
do,
about.
but that's the thing is, and then they kind of you have to cycle away from it because they want you to roll out a New Jersey every year. So then you end up like the first two or whatever Vice cities were awesome, and they didn't want to just keep like changing one little stripe on it or whatever. So then they did I think they did like their purple ransom notes, which were horrible, and
Those
now
are
I
the
think
worst
they've come
jerseys.
back to them.
Those are
Yeah.
my that the Celtics gray jersey that came out in like
Oh, the Jersey
2014.
era was rough. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like the Mavs garbage can or garbage
Oh,
bag
that was
jerseys.
yeah.
Yeah, I think they only wore them for one game, but they were just like
Yeah,
they literally
those
look like
gold
garbage
ones?
bags.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I guess I'll contradict myself. We have all this, but we got rid of the Christmas jerseys, which I always actually liked because, like, to your point about the cup, it's just one game. It's not some huge rollout. Like, there were, I think, pretty limited run to buy even those jerseys. But I think like the first Bucks Christmas game in this modern era with Giannis, I think they still had them. Like, I think there's some Antetokounmpo Christmas jerseys, but then ever since gone. And I was like, oh, that would actually be a fun one. Also, it's
I like
hard to
this
rock a
idea.
basketball jersey as a grown man. So to your other
Yes.
point,
I just
let's
don't.
focus more attention on hoodies. Yeah, let's innovate the hoodie game a little bit more. That's my other thing. Anyway,
No, I really do like that. Like, let's make this like a special event. Like, if you want to have all these
yeah,
extra jerseys, like if like back in the day, the All-Star game, players would just wear the jersey of the team that they wore. You could kind of make them all the same, like colors, like theme, right? But also reflect the team each player is coming from. If you want to get like
right.
hyper specific, there's ways you could do this that aren't just flooding every game we watch with unrecognized. Like, what team are we even watching? Sometimes it's like you see like them come out on the court, like, and like I don't know who coordinated, because like they'll be wearing like very similar colors sometimes. Just
Yeah.
there's lots to complain about with all of that stuff. But one thing that I know Celtics fans are complaining about is the effort they saw from their team last night, and some choices both by Jaylen Brown, by Joe Mazzulla, in terms of who was going to play, what style they were going to play on the court. And I'm just curious, what did you see in that game last night?
Yeah, I mean, from more of the Celtics side, for the Bucks, I mean, I expected them to get trounced, to be honest with you, the way Boston has played this year. And, obviously, whenever you don't have Giannis, it's tough, but the Bucks just looked mostly like for half of the games they play without Giannis. For literally like 2 quarters of each of the individual games, they're like decent. They kind of hang in there. They kind of are roughly even, treading water. And then the trend has been the other 2 quarters of those games, whichever 2 quarters it may be, they just get smoked. Like they lose the rope a little bit. The defense slips. They give up a bunch of open threes. Which, funny enough, I mean, even this game where they were great, the first quarter they did kind of lose the rope. I mean, Boston was able to just break down guys off the dribble immediately, and the open threes were everywhere early in that game. And Milwaukee actually scored decently well, I think, taking advantage of, which we all realize, like Boston, just a pretty small team. Cade is not tiny, but he's not like a brute either. And then outside of him, there's just no size. So Milwaukee was able to finally take some advantage of that, which is funny because they've been one of the worst rebounding teams and really struggled with rebounding on both ends. They were able to do it a bit against Boston to kind of stabilize. But it seemed like the Celtics, once in the second half, the Bucks were a little better about trying to keep someone like Kyle Kuzma on Jaylen Brown versus some of the switches, they were letting him really get into the paint, and then those threes opened up. And frankly, they just played harder. They just
Yep.
closed out more. And when those threes weren't open, then it's like, okay, there's really a ton on Jalen's shoulders of you just need to make more of these shots too. Like there's not the wide open three that is still it's a good play to make, but it's just easier. When those are gone, then suddenly like offense gets hard. And I'm used to talking about this because it's also been how the Bucks have looked for a lot of their games since Giannis went down, or even just when he's not on the court. So I just thought for the Bucks, they just executed a lot better than they did early in the game throughout the latter three quarters. And Boston, it felt like there weren't many other levers to pull besides, well, let's try these threes if they're not as open. Let's let Jalen just go off. And he was great. I mean, 30 points and only 3 assists, but 30 points is, something without a lot of help. But it seemed like the Bucks did a better job kind of making him work for it and then not opening up those catch and shoot threes, which early in the game, I was like, if he wants to like Hezzy tween his way to 30, 40 points, like I think you have to allow that versus letting
Yep.
all these shooters just like rain threes on you. And I think that's kind of the choice the Bucks made.
It was a brilliant choice too, in my opinion. They basically used the Celtics playbook against them in this game, in that they came out hard and aggressive. They shot a lot of threes.
Yeah.
They played very aggressive defense that got under particularly Jaylen Brown's skin. We saw that give and take between the two of them that really just kind of got in his head. And as you were saying, convinced him to really try to take the game over himself rather than doing the style of play that has made Boston successful, which is exactly how Milwaukee was playing, by moving the ball, keeping everybody engaged. And then another thing that hasn't been talked about too much, but between Anthony Simons, Derek White, and Sam Hauser, the shooting from beyond the arc for Boston was just abysmal. And it is always okay to let a 40%-ish three-point shooter shoot through a bad shooting night. But you should not have three guys doing that at the same time. And you should probably consider a different look, maybe lean into your defensive side of the ball when your shot isn't falling and try to get some defense into offense going, just so your confidence comes back and you stop paying attention to Kyle Kuzma. But that didn't happen. We saw how it ended. What I want to know from you is, did you see something for the Bucks to build off of? Was this just a desperation win? I mean, how is this fitting into the bigger picture, which we'll touch on very shortly?
Yeah, I think there's a bit to build on here. I think one of the stories for this season for me has been Kuzma, who actually, even after Giannis got hurt, had been coming off of the bench. This was kind of his return to the starting lineup, which I think was overdue. Obviously, he has a reputation, certainly somewhat deserved, off and on court. But on court this season, I've been pretty critical of old friend of your show, Doc Rivers, not specifically your show, but Boston.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know if he's been on. I don't think he's been on, but he does love to talk. But he has done a good job with Kuzma of stripping down his offensive game and saying, like, I know you were the man in DC, but these mid rangers, like, they're not going to help our team. Like, you need to get to the rim, take open threes, and just defend and rebound. And that was his game here. I mean, he only took 2 threes. I want to say very few mid range jumpers as well. I don't have the shot chart in front of me. Had 6 rebounds, a block, did turn it over 3 times, but 31 points on 13 of 17 shooting, just getting downhill over and over and over again. And he's a good finisher. He has some random misses that may leave you scratching your head, but he is still like a 6'9" athletic player, like a hard player to guard when he gets moving downhill, right? Not a lot of players in the league have that kind of size and speed. And I think this may be a revitalization of his career. So I think Milwaukee needs to lean on him more and just say, go be right aid Giannis, right? Like, no one can truly replace what he does. Like, but we have all this spacing, right? We built a team to put a bunch of spacing around Giannis. Let's put it around Kuzma and let him try and do this. And he had no assists in this game, usually as the assist too. But I thought that was part of it, letting Kuzma go off. Portis was just, I mean, sensate. I mean, that's not.
I
You
miss
can't
that Bobby
always pick on
Portis. I
that.
didn't like watching it, but I miss it.
Yeah, it's fun. And even defensively, I mean, he had some great plays against like Derek White, I think, where he forced a jump or forced him out of bounds. Like, we hadn't seen that level of fight from him. So as one of the leaders of this team, it was great for him to kind of show that, as well as just hitting all the shots. That helps too. But there are two guards, Rollins and KPJ, really amping up the pressure defensively. They picked up 9 combined fouls, and Cole Anthony, their third guard, added another 5. So they fouled a lot, which did lead to some Boston free throws. But after the game, Porter Jr. kind of said, we're trying to, mostly him and Rollins, but all three, I guess, establish ourselves as like the defenders who are physical and able to get away with this stuff. We're going to keep defending like this and kind of try and earn that rep. And I do think the Bucks needed, even with Giannis, but especially without him, an identity. And so I think their identity is going to be like, we're going to be physical on the perimeter, try and force these turnovers. And then on the other end, we're going to shoot threes. And then KPJ, Kuzma are going to slash into that space. And Porter Jr., 13 assists. I thought he did a really good job of playmaking and not settling again for those mid range jumpers, which he can make, but you don't want that to be like your first look in a possession. The Bucks did a really good job offensively, which has not been the norm for them, not settling for the okay look, going and seeking out a better shot.
Very cool. So I asked you if this was maybe a desperation win because
it definitely was that too, by the way.
Yeah, no, totally.
Hopefully these things continue, but it was certainly a desperation.
Because that Giannis guy, he did not play, obviously. We can talk about why briefly in a moment, but the other thing that's going on, which is also tied to that calf injury, is the soft trade request, or however we want to frame what is going on with him and the team. My understanding is there was a players-only meeting ahead of this game, and that they kind of talked about how to weather the storm of his creation. But to be fair, if you're going to have a franchise player be dissatisfied and want to force his way out, this is the gentlest I've ever seen anyone try to do it. So I don't know how that's going to affect the process, but I'm curious to hear how you think this process is going to. Is it going to go to the offseason? Is it slow walk to get as close to the deadline as possible to get the best possible deal mid-season? Is it just going to go away? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
I really do think it's not determined which way it's going to go yet fully. And I understand the writing on the wall stuff and everything, but I think to me and scouring the reporting and trying to really have, eyes fully open to this and not just, too many Bucks fans are just like, oh, it's fake news. They want him gone. Like, I mean, if it was all legitimate fake news, Giannis could take 5 seconds to clarify that and it would be over. It's not like the reporting is the most recent one from Shams of ESPN is, Giannis and his agent going to go to the Bucks and just have a conversation about his future and like kind of make a resolution, which does indicate maybe he could be gone by the deadline. Also indicates like there could be some sort of other satisfactory ending. They're not going to him saying we want out. He's never officially said that. He kind of the Knicks thing was super weird. It was just like, I wouldn't mind playing there. Do you want to talk to them? And the Bucks are like, all right, they don't have anything we want, but sure. And lo and behold, nothing happened. But I really think like this win, if the Bucks went on a like 5-game winning streak and made some sort of a trade that, kind of engendered more positive feelings from Giannis or the team, I think he would just like be back in and play out the season and be happy and then revisit in the offseason. I think unless he is traded, I don't think there will be a firm resolution. Like there's no positive long-term Bucks resolution mid-year besides just still being on the roster post February, whatever it is, because he can't extend yet. He can't extend until October. So that's one of the difficulties of the last couple of times that Giannis put pressure on like this. The Bucks immediately respond by doing something. Drew Holiday, Damian Lillard, whatever it is. And then Giannis extends, and they did the Miles Turner thing, which clearly it hasn't made enough of an impact on the team yet this season. But even if they went out and traded the remaining future first, he can't ink it right now. So I do think it's more of a difficult position where I think from the Bucks, they would love to just get through this year. They'll have a pick in the draft. They'll have future picks. Then they can kind of really have this meeting with Giannis and go like, if we do this, like, what do you think? That kind of a deal, or at least try to impress him. Whereas mid-season, it's a little bit more fraught because if you get the guy and Giannis gets hurt again and your team sucks, maybe you traded those picks and Giannis is still out because he can be expiring going into next season. So I don't think there's a ton of clarity. I think Giannis in his heart of hearts would be thrilled if the Bucks ran off a 8-game winning streak right now and he comes back and they're like 7th in the East or whatever. And, okay, let's make a run. Let's do what Indiana did last year. But I think if they continue to look sad, if they have this great game, don't build on it, go lose in Brooklyn, which is their next game. I think it could certainly go the other way too, but it won't be the Bucks doing it. That's my number one takeaway is they're not interested in this. Everyone can say like they should go get the package, they should rebuild. This front office, this ownership, it's not what they're built to want to do. They want to have Giannis, so it's going to have to come from him if he's going to be going. That's the big question: is how much does he want to go, and how specific of a place does he want to go to? Because if I'm the Bucks, like love you, Giannis, we did a lot for you. You did a ton for us. I'm not taking the Heat package. I'm not taking the Warriors package. I'm not taking the Knicks package. I'm not taking the Lakers package. Right? It's got to be a team with real stuff because otherwise we're kind of just cooked for the next 10 years.
So that brings me to the other side of the coin, which is the calf injury, because I think there are teams out there who have, like, just look at the Oklahoma City Thunder as the most obvious example. Would that make them better? Maybe, but maybe not with this calf injury. And,
Yeah.
they could they could definitely survive screwing up in this particular way, no matter how it ended with the treasure chest that they have. But the fact that, like, he is 32 or 31?
31.
31. With recurring calf injuries in an era where that freaks people out for very understandable reasons, it might not be so easy to convince these teams with the good packages to part with them, particularly because, at least in the West, a lot of the teams with assets are doing really well. Like Houston is another team that I think would be a great fit for him and would actually still have enough left afterwards to compete.
Yeah.
But who are they going to let go of that Milwaukee is going to want, that is going to make that deal happen and everyone is happy on both sides? I'm pretty skeptical of. Do you think there's any West team that has actually a good package that is realistic?
I think Houston's the only one actually. I think because it's different front office, but we've seen that franchise before in the face of like a seemingly overwhelming dynasty push the chips in anyway. And I think although they do have the roadmap here with Şengün and Amen and Reed Shepard, all these other guys, they did press the KD button, which tells you like we're not interested in winning a title 5 years from now as much as we are winning one in the next 2
They
years.
should be. That's a whole other conversation.
Well, for sure. I don't disagree, but that's where they've gotten themselves. And if I'm them, and it's a little tricky to make the salaries work, but these teams employ people whose full-time job it is to do it, right? If I can tack Amen and some of my picks, probably not all, onto FVV's money and then figure out the rest to bring in Giannis, I just think he could make what they do so overwhelming. And then just if you're gonna try and beat this super balanced super team that OKC is, and Shea is obviously a phenomenal superstar, but I think their real recipe is they're just so deep, right? That there's just no letdown. I think probably the way to do it is we have 48 minutes of of KD or Giannis on the court at all times. Like that's pretty overwhelming in itself. Even this lesson Kevin Durant,
With that
that's a
kind of
pretty
defense
ridiculous
surrounding it, yeah.
combo.
I mean,
Right,
even
with that
without him,
defense, athleticism. Yeah. And I've heard like, oh, I think they'd rather give Şengün than Amen. I mean, either
I
one would
wouldn't.
be a good building block for the Bucks, but
I
no, I
wouldn't.
mean, I just if your goal is to win now, I don't like the Amen Giannis fit at all, right? I mean, what you're doing realistically is literally upgrading bigger, better, stronger Amen Thompson, who let him loose on this team where you're so athletic, like go get every offensive rebound, Giannis. He could be an absolute force. Um, I think it's only Houston though. Like San Antonio, a lot of Bucks fans like them. I think I go the other way. I think they're looking at this like Harper looks great, Castle looks great, obviously Wemby looks great. Let's give this 2 years. Let's like
Yeah, the
I
Spurs aren't doing
Hartenstein probably
anything.
goes. No, I don't think so. Like let Hartenstein or whatever Caruso. They have to get rid of OKC to not be in the mega tax after this year. And then 2 years from now, we can really make a run and we can be cost controlled and we have all the picks. I think it's just Houston, unless I don't know, does someone else get desperate? But a lot of those teams already sent picks. Like if the Lakers had 4 firsts and 3 swaps and Reeves, maybe it's a conversation. I wouldn't be thrilled about it, but Reeves does look great. But I just think the rest of the teams you'd look at, it's like they don't have enough stuff. Like the Wolves, Anthony Giannis would be super fun. But what are they? They don't have anything of interest
It
to
would it
me.
would it would be like Milwaukee in the years where they were better than they are now, but not quite good enough to win a title. They would be
Right.
within striking distance, but with no tools to get there.
Yeah, and I don't even think they have the tools to get themselves in that spot, right? Like I wouldn't. I'm not trading Giannis for Julius Randle, Jaden McDaniels, and 1 or 2 firsts or whatever. Like then you're just here, like okay, we're more balanced, but we have no picks, and we're just going to get trounced by the rest of the East for the next 4 or 5 years.
New Orleans fire sale wouldn't interest you at all. Trey Murphy, Herb
I mean, it
Jones.
interests me. It interests me in non-Giannis conversations.
Yes, as does
And
all of us. Yes.
yeah, that's exactly, and that's the problem for the Bucks, right? But I don't think, now that they don't even have full control of these picks, they could trade you your own 27 or 20, yeah, 27 pick back, which is interesting. But the way things have gone with Zion, like if Zion were healthy and looked good, like maybe you could talk yourself into it. But as much as I like Murphy and Jones, like if you get those guys back for Giannis, I don't know, maybe in a lot of picks, but the other part of it that we've talked about is I wouldn't let Giannis dictate exactly where he goes because again, I'm not taking Towns and 4 second rounders, but I'm not going to send him to the whatever they are 2 and 16 pellet like that. I don't think he's interested in that either. He just keeps saying he wants to win, and I think he'd probably just retire and go to Greece if they
Oh
traded him
boy.
there. So I wouldn't do that to him.
What about East? I know you said the Knicks don't appeal. Some other teams that have been floated that I think would at least be interesting: Pistons and the
Yeah,
Pacers.
Hawks are my number one because of the
Yeah, I think
draft
Hawks are the
capital
most
they have.
likely in the East, absolutely.
Yeah,
But I don't think you're getting Jalen.
no, I don't either.
So then, what are you interested in that you think would be the right kind of package from Atlanta?
Well, funny, we just talked about Zion. I think Shamit Dua posted something similar, who does a great job covering the Pels. A 3-teamer where Trey goes to New Orleans, Zion goes to Milwaukee, Giannis, but then it's really the picks, right? So Atlanta, crucially, because of that Queen trade everyone talks about, can make it so the Bucks have both theirs and the Pelicans unprotected first in this loaded draft. And then if you're without Giannis, you can really kind of shamelessly tank if you're the Bucks.
Yep.
And hopefully you'd have 2 top 10 picks, which is a pretty immediate turnaround of
In
now we
this
have
draft,
real
yeah,
young talent. Yeah, in this draft, that's a big deal. And then they have other picks. I would want like give me Asa Newell, right? Like I don't know what he is, but get like random young guys. I agree. I don't think you're getting Jalen anymore. They could also do a straight up more 1-for-1 deal, sending Porzingis, Risache in the picks. I kind of think you want Porzingis and you're getting Giannis if you're the Hawks. Maybe they don't care.
you don't want Porzingis.
Would you rather have Porzingis or Trey Young? I guess it's probably Trey
I would
Young.
rather have Trey Young because the best ability is
Yeah,
availability. I can't even talk
that's
this
a great
morning. But
call.
yeah,
Yeah, but those are kind of and then Porzingis is just expiring. So if you're the Bucks, you can reset
well,
your
if you're
bets
looking at it
now.
that way, yeah, that's different. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's our Anthony Simons basically. It
exactly.
really stinks that he is not living up to what a lot of people hoped he would be. But I think he's a player who is never going to start in this league again. So he needs to figure out how to play as a bench player. No more
Yeah,
room for those kind of guards starting. So if
no.
a gun was to your head and you had to decide as front office what to do right now, what would you do and what do you think is going to happen?
Mm. Um, I would. I mean, I wouldn't want to trade him. I would try and make it work, but on at the same time, and this is one of my fears for the Bucks this year, I'm not going to be blindly aggressive with the remaining picks. So they have right now they could do 31 first and 32 swap. If they wait until the draft, this is part of the reason I wouldn't be too aggressive now. They could trade their first this year, but you can't trade it till after you pick the guy, but you can agree to a deal. 31, 32 swap, and 33. Suddenly you have 3 firsts and a swap, which is, something, especially because teams are going to continue to love betting against the Bucks future as they should. Even if Giannis sticks around his whole career, I don't think, he'll be that kind of league changing force 5 years from now when he's 36. I hope he is, but I get why you'd bet against that. And I would, if you can get through the storm of this year without getting too desperate or losing him, I would go for it again one more summer and see, can you, for those 3 firsts, can you just draft someone or can you trade for that wing player? Because I do think their roster is not as far away as it may seem. I like their young point guards and Porter Jr. and Rollins. I think Turner's a good fit. They're not utilizing him very well, but I think he's a good fit. and then Kuzma will be expiring. Portis will only have 2 years left because there's some sort of trade. You just get that 3, and then suddenly you could have a really nice starting lineup. Green's been hurt, but he's been probably the league's best 3-point shooter this season. Like, there's some pieces here. I think they'd need a new coach. So that's also something I would explore in the very near future. Although, nice game for Doc, where I thought he did a good job against the Celtics, but overall have not been thrilled with it this season. But then I would try to do that. I really would. I know everyone not Bucks related will say that's stupid, just rebuild. And I get it. And I think logically that's the right move. But like the meaning that Giannis has to the franchise, I would try to continue making it work. But if push comes to shove and he really hits that button, I'm just gonna bother Atlanta and probably a little bit Houston, but mostly Atlanta. To your point, like Detroit, Toronto, the Pacers, it's like fine what they can give, but it's just their picks and their swaps and decent young players. It's still going to be a pretty long rebuild, I think, if you do that. The Detroit one I find the most interesting if you can get Duran, but then it's like, what do you do with Turner? You go sell Turner. It's kind of like you end up just bartering a lot to try and get a real roster after you make a move like that.
Yeah, that's the thing that people don't think about as much as they should. Is like after these mega trades, a lot of times the picks that you're getting back won't be as good if the team is good.
Right.
And then on the flip side, if you ship out too much, then like you want Giannis to be happy, he's not extended. Do you really want to trade away half your team and basically just recreate his current situation in a new place?
Right.
You have to think about these things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like for what's the Pacers offer? Because I haven't really dug into this. I mean, are they sending Siakam or is it everything
presumably,
but
or like a 3-team?
Okay.
Yeah, or like oh god, who is the wing? I'm blanking on his name right now.
Nesmith?
No, not Nesmith, but Nesmith is an intriguing character as well. I miss him. I wish he never left the Celtics. But
ironically, he is like the player the Bucks absolutely need the most. So it would be a little ironic if they got him back in a deal where they have to give up Giannis because he on this team, like he's the exact player. Like he with their guards and other players,
particularly considering Brogdon was dealt for him to get him to the Pacers as well, too. So it's just like a never-ending cycle between these 3 teams.
Yeah, let's complete the loop. Yeah.
The Celtics are not a good fit in terms of their ability to salary match. Like I don't think you would want Derek White back plus parts. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it'd have to be one of the Jays.
Offers. And that just doesn't make any sense, right? Yeah.
No, I don't think Boston then is that interested.
But is there a player on the Celtics roster who might be interesting to be part of a deal? Like just someone you would be keeping an eye on. I don't need you to make me a deal per se, but like, are there like Anthony's expiring, Sam Hauser? I mean, like, are there players on this roster, the younger guys that are starting to come up, Jordan Walsh? Are there valuable pieces you think that might be something that could be included in a deal that could bring Boston something back in like a 3-team deal?
A Giannis deal or just any deal?
Well, it could be any deal, but particularly a Giannis deal. That's because I think from Celtics fans, Celtics are like interested in 2 things really with this whole Giannis business, which is mostly like, is this going to make life harder for Boston in the Eastern Conference if he comes somewhere in the East, or will it make it easier if he goes out West? And then he's not going to be part of. They're not trading for Giannis, but they're looking, for example, for a front court, maybe some backcourt depth or some other kind of like boost to the roster for the future based on moving a player they have on there now by getting in on the Giannis deal by helping facilitate.
Yeah, I mean, Walsh is interesting, but he's the kind of player who, and probably same with like a Kada or even a Pritchard, like ironically, the Celtics kind of were in like, clearly not tank, but like, not focusing on maximizing this season, we'll say with their off season. But even still, even with that said, though, I think those are the players that help you more when you're a winning team. Like, I don't think if you're the Bucks and you now need to quasi rebuild, I'm not like, we need Jordan Walsh. Like, to me, he's good on a good team. I don't know otherwise. So the only involvement that would make sense to me is if it's more like let's that Detroit example where the Bucks get Duran as like the centerpiece in the deal back. Do they then send Turner for like Simons and or Hauser to Boston for more other like picks? Really, it'd probably just be picks. Like that's I think what I would see the most is either players on their current roster, like do you want Portis in the front court, like for Hauser? I think their salaries are similar, something like that, which I don't know if Boston want to take that money on. If Tatum continues to look good, maybe they'd be like, yeah, we can go win the East this year. Like Detroit had made this huge trade. They look great, but they have a lot to figure out. And the calf stuff that you mentioned, like we can just maybe be good now and the next 5 years. That's what I would see as the most likely, just because I don't think there's too many of the young guys to me that if I'm again like kind of building a new era of Bucks basketball, they're the guys I want. Obviously the Jays, but like way too good, right? They're not going out unless Giannis is going in, and maybe not even then, which is kind of the end of any conversation there.
Yeah. So 1,000-foot view of the Bucks season as you expected it versus how it's played out, and the Celtics season versus how it's played out.
Pretty much the opposite. I was low on Boston. I just thought for me, it was just the front court. I just thought I don't know how you can play at a high level. And I said the same about Indiana, and the injuries have proven me right, but Boston is very much not. Um, but it'll be interesting to see, I guess how everything goes from here. But certainly a great start for Boston. I think Jaylen Brown really has been super impressive, but also just what Missoula has done, just getting the whole team, to play like this. But all the things that haven't gone right for them, and they still have won this many games. Like I know White has not shot the ball well. Pritchard started off ice cold, and it seems like maybe his emergence has coincided with the winning lately. But regardless, they're 15-10, which is really good. And for the Bucks, I thought they'd be better. I thought their defense would be better. I don't. I think everyone, but certainly myself, underestimated the rebounding focus around the league this year, which has really hurt them and kind of some of their smaller lineups. And Turner, who's not a great physical rebounder himself, or box
Weirdly,
out
right?
man.
Yeah.
Yeah, he should be better. He's just not. He's more of a finesse player, a finesse big. But if you also though, and the Bucks have just been disappointing on all fronts. But 4 under 500 with Giannis missing the amount of games he's missed, like I probably wouldn't be totally shocked if you had told me that at the beginning of the year. So now it's really, can we continue to play a sort of consistent style like they did against Boston, play some real defense, which it took them a little while, but then they did, and then have Giannis for more than 17 of the 26 games going forward. Those are going to be the key. Obviously, they won't in the immediate future. It's going to be at least a couple more weeks here. But now it's all about stabilizing here and seeing if you can climb the rungs of the play in, although they're pretty far behind the Cleveland, Miami, Atlanta triumvirate that's the rest of the play in right now. And by the way, what a nightmare if they make the play in game and you have to go to Cleveland to get out of it. I don't think anybody expected to see that 25 games into the season.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the weirder twists. I can't decide if they are just like a very banged up
Yeah.
team that will get better or if there's some kind of funk going around that is also contributing to it, but they don't look right no matter what it is.
No. Some of the Garland on-off numbers I've heard have been pretty alarming. Like they're actually pretty good with like Mitchell and Mobley on, but when you throw in Garland, they're not, and it's sad because I think it's almost all injury based. But that every time you hear something about Darius Garland, like his back or his whatever, his foot is banged
Toe.
up and a toe, and it feels like right now it's kind of sapping him of some of that ability and. I think he's got to get right, or they're just going to be this. I don't think they'll be playing like they're
They
one
seem
loss
like they
away
should be
from
better than they are.
third.
Yeah. Yeah.
They should be. I think they will be too. I mean, they've had other guys in and out, but it's really bunched, right? I mean, Boston's still in third with 10 losses. Atlanta's in ninth with 11. So you can't overreact too much to them being the Cavs being seventh when they win one game and suddenly they're like fifth.
Yeah. It's still early.
Yeah.
Well, the podcast time, it is not still early. You've been very generous with your time, and I thank you for that. But before we let you go, we have two things on the docket still. One of which is just to remind our guests where to find your work, if you could.
Yeah, appreciate it. So at Ti Windisch on Twitter and Blue Sky, TiWindisch. And then wherever you listen to or watch this fine podcast, the Gyro Step, Gyro Step, we do a bunch of Bucks coverage there, usually about 2 episodes per week. But with all the news lately, sometimes we have to add an extra one. And obviously, if the big news does happen, there'll probably be like 10 pods that week because it'll be hard to cover the meaning of it to the franchise, breaking down the moves, the players, the picks, all that stuff. So whenever there's Buck stuff happening, we're probably podcasting about it.
So the other thing that we do when we close the podcast is something to remember or forget. And in this case, I'll model it for you in that it's important to remember, both as fans and as teams, that any team in the NBA can beat any other team in the NBA on a night where you do not bring the appropriate level of respect and effort for your opponent. So don't get too high and don't get too low, and try to enjoy the game even if you are getting waxed, wherever you can find some enjoyment in it, because it is going to be a miserable season for both Milwaukee fans and Boston fans if they live and die with the wins and losses of their team. Neither of these teams are talented enough to be able to just show up and will their way to a win once things start going sideways. They have to be playing at their most focused and engaged levels if they really do want to win with the talent they have on the roster this season. So just try to remember to enjoy it. And, if you happen to be playing for one of these teams, that's not bad advice either.
Yeah, that's great. I will say a pretty similar note. Something to remember is just you're allowed to just watch and enjoy the game in front of you. And I just think whether it's the transaction stuff or even outside of like the Giannis trade craziness or all the other trade stuff, like what does this mean for this player's legacy, or how does this change how we look at the season? Or there's 82 of these things. Plus, if you're in the Cup finals every year. And I just think too many people, especially online, which I'm trying to be less of, like kind of do the show and then disappear more. Um, the whole point of this is to like sit down for 2-ish hours and watch your favorite team and players and just like enjoy it. I'm like, that was
It's
a great shot.
entertainment.
It doesn't have to feel like, yeah, like, oh, I'm taking this guy in the trade machine because he hit a button. Just watch the game. Like there's room for all this other stuff. There's certainly enough coverage of this other stuff, but it's entertainment. It's fun. It's a sport we love. Like I just think, and I'm trying to do better at this myself and always remind people of like, enjoy the games. And especially once we're able, hopefully, to get Giannis back on the court, I always, every time he does something great, which is common, like just enjoy this. Like this is what we all do it for. And the Celtics too. I mean, you could certainly say as well, like, a great team and kind of in the gap year or whatever. But as soon as Tatum's back, and even now, like Jaylen Brown, Finals MVP, and all-time great Celtic. Well, not super high on the list because it's quite the franchise, but you know what I mean, right? It's on the list. Great to watch him every single night, even if he's frustrating sometimes, which every player is. But that would be my thing to remember.
Very cool. Well, thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me. It was great. And who knows, maybe this will be an unexpected playoff rematch. I'll tell you, the 22 series, it could, I mean, the way the East is, who knows? The 22 series was my favorite series the Bucks have ever lost. When they almost had it, they were so close in that game 6, and the wheels fell off in game 7. But being able to push that great Boston team that went to the finals and then won it, 2 years later, without Chris Middleton, that I thought was one of their most best gutsy series, and certainly the most enjoyable where they lost. Where even in that game 7, they let Grant Williams shoot. He ended up killing them. It was working.
I mean,
Really
you kind of owed him after stepping on his head.
right, for sure. And
So
he
crazy. He
took
just
to
gets right
yeah,
back
that
up
was
there. Giannis steps on his head.
I know. He's a tough guy. He probably talks a little too much, but a tough guy for sure. Hopefully he gets healthy this season. But that was just a great series. And that was one of the true like battle series that I think make the league great when you have one like that. Indiana, every series of theirs was like that this year, it felt like. But I'll always that's the only one I think where I look back where the Bucks didn't win. And I'm like, that was still pretty awesome.
Very cool. All right, y'all. Take care. And we're back with an Alex. Alex
Hello,
had some
everyone.
stuff that he wanted to weigh in on. So we are not going to, limit our Alex. We have.
Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. It's our pleasure, honestly.
Yeah.
What did you think of that game?
Yeah, so I watched the game last night, and I think it was a little bit of kind of everything that we've seen from Boston this season, where they got off to a really hot start. The three-pointer was flowing. The offense seemed like it was really clicking. Jaylen Brown, Peyton Pritchard, Josh Minot, Jordan Walsh, who just continues to be an outstanding basketball player for these last couple of weeks. Everybody seemed like they were really flowing. They were really doing well, and at least offensively. And then somewhere through kind of the end of the second quarter, you could start to feel the momentum shift a little bit. The Bucks were just kind of hanging on. They didn't go away. They made every phase of the game competitive, and they started getting a little bit more physical and a little bit chippier. And they started doing something that I've noticed can derail the Celtics from time to time that we talked about in the chat. They started baiting Jaylen Brown a little bit into derailing the offense and matchup hunting. And then after Jaylen started doing that, Peyton Pritchard started doing that, and then Derek White started doing that. And there was this kind of cascading effect where the ball movement that was really working at the beginning of the game and really throughout most of the first half starts to slow, and Boston starts to go to individual matchup hunting, which Scal made a point about on air repeatedly. And he was right. The offense got worse. And on top of that, the Celtics just missed every three seemingly that they took in the course of the second half. So it's a little bit of kind of both of the realities for this team so far, where when the three-pointer is going and the ball movement is going, they look like a top 5 offense. They look extremely crisp, extremely polished. And then when they devolve to matchup hunting, things tend to get muggy and the ball movement stops. And suddenly they're shooting the same amount of threes as they were in the first half, but none of them are going in because the looks are worse. They're shooting under pressure, et cetera, et cetera. A couple other, highlights. Sam Hauser has not had a good season for the most part, at least shooting the ball. He's been way down from his averages in previous seasons.
But recently, he's been in the last 10 games, he's been shooting about 40%. Just need to point
recently, he's been better. Although in the last game, he was not doing that. He missed.
That was very much not the case. Yes,
there was one sequence in the third quarter where Sam Hauser got 4 shot attempts in the course of one possession and missed all of them, including a bunny at the rim. And it's just like, man, I get that Sam Hauser is in a funk. He's a streaky player, and he's ultimately probably reliant on others to create for him more than he is to create for himself. But it's you got to have those. I mean, that's just like that's just basic stuff. But really, despite all of this, the offense is going to be volatile. The offense is, it is what it is. It's going to go up and down. It always has under the Joe Mazzulla era. Where I really struggled with last night's game is the Celtics defense was awful throughout the second half, and really for frankly most of the game. Bobby Portis was lighting Boston up. Kyle Kuzma was also lighting Boston up. He had 30 points, something like that. Kevin Porter Jr. had a triple double. Ryan Rollins had a nice game. All these players that, the Bucks have been on a skid lately. They've been 10 of 12 without Giannis in the loss column. Like, they've lost 10 in their last 12. Their offense has been good. They've been hitting a lot of open threes, but it's just like you can't be credibly trying to establish yourself as, one of the best teams in the league. And the Celtics have gone through moments where they look like that and moments where they don't. But it's just one of those things where it's like the defensive stuff for this team, even while the offense is humming and getting better, has really not been there this year. And that's the biggest difference between the roster last year, which was stacked with like a Drew Holiday and an Al Horford and a Luke Corner and all of these guys who, are good offensive players, but really excel as defenders. This roster is completely different. And there are players on this team that can make individually good defensive efforts. Jordan Walsh, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Neemias Queta, like those guys have all been having good years as defenders. But the collective defense of this team has not been all that good throughout basically the entire year. And when the threes aren't falling and the ball movement stops, that's when this team gets into trouble, because they just give up these huge runs. And it kind of seems like it doesn't matter when it's whether it's a star player or whether it's role players. Like, everybody can get off against this team.
One thing I'm going to be watching for, Doc Rivers said post-game, and this is another reason why I have an issue with the NBA Cup now, that they spent the entire 2 days before the game just practicing on how to take away Boston's successful tendencies in the recent good play.
Yeah.
And Joe Mazzulla made a point of saying that for whatever reason, he didn't, comment that I'm sure they studied the Bucks' tendencies, but he made it clear that they did not act on their knowledge of the Bucks' tendencies in this game, which is concerning and something I'm wondering if we are going to see more teams studying up on how to beat Boston now that they are playing well, and that in turn impacting how well they play.
Well, of course they will. I mean, and every team that it does its due diligence and cares about winning basketball games is going to do film study against any competitive team, and they're going to really work on it. And Boston is a competitive team. They've now established that this is a competitive squad. They're not going to miss the playoffs unless somebody gets hurt. They're going to be in the thick of this. And so teams are going to start taking them seriously, and they're going to have to prepare and respond accordingly. Now, I think for the most part, this Bucks game, I'm pretty comfortable chalking that up to just like a poor showing, lazy effort, and also, those nights happen. Sometimes the shot doesn't fall. But you are right that teams are going to start preparing for Boston a little differently. But I guess I would hazard, Justin, that that's kind of the case for every team every season. Like the more
yes and no. I mean, you're not going to bother to scout teams that are trying to lose much. And, you're not going to scout teams that are trying to win super in depth much during the regular season.
I guess I would just push back only in that, Boston, specifically when it comes to Boston, this is a team that people always scout. They have for regardless of who's on the roster for
grudges,
a number of reasons.
Shall we say
grudges, or whether it's just like trying to jockey for East standings and having a responsibility to put your best foot forward. Boston is a measuring stick team, and it has been basically the entirety of Jalen and Jason's careers. So I guess I would hazard that, yes, teams are going to do their due diligence against this team and try and prepare for them and, be ready for that matchup. But I don't think that's anything that the Celtics aren't used to. And I would expect them to adjust accordingly. Joe Mazzulla has shown that he's very good at adjustments on the fly. It takes a little time. It always does, but he's good at tweaking around the margins to find advantages. So I'm not super worried about that per se.
Yeah.
What I am worried about is more so that the architecture of the team as it's currently designed feels like there is a hard ceiling to what they're capable of defensively. And we've seen that, teams that are offense heavy will win in this league more than they don't. And I ultimately think that, Mazzulla's coaching style has always leaned towards the offensive end of the floor as it is. And, I think that's bore out successfully, but you can be a great offensive team and an average defensive team and still be really competitive. If you're a 22nd ranked defensive team in the league or a 24th ranked defensive team in the league, that's when things get tricky. And right now, Boston is trending more towards that bracket than they are towards that middle of the pack 16, 17, which, we've seen teams that can be that level of defense and still be considered a credible and serious contender. I still don't know if we know if this team is a contender or not.
Not as constructed now, but I mean, with Tatum back in the fold and maybe a couple of additions, one or two additions, trades. Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm thinking is let's assume, because it seems all the rumors are pointing to in the practice footage and the Twitter doctors, everything is pointing.
It's coming. He's coming back.
That Jason Tatum is going to play basketball this season, whether it's in February or March or something like that. That seems likely at this point, which is astonishing. But so let's assume that he comes back. I think we both are of the belief that at the trade deadline, the Celtics are more likely to target depth pieces than they are to go for a big swing. But let's assume they add, a couple of depth pieces, maybe one more, another guard and another big of some kind, both depth rotation guys, not shaking up the starting lineup. if you bring that in, considering Walsh's expanded role, considering Hugo Gonzalez's emergence as a rotation guy, considering Josh Minott now pretty clearly establishing his role as this small ball five, does that team make a contender? I think you could argue in the East it could make a contender. I still have a hard
Contention in
time.
the sense that you will make it to the finals. We know what's going to happen when they get there.
I think that it's reasonable to think that that team could make noise in the Eastern Conference. I'm not going to say that they're going to win it, because I think the Knicks and the Pistons have shown that they're both teams that should be taken seriously. But it still feels like they're a couple moves away from really challenging a team. I mean, we're not even going to get into the Thunder, who are, wrecking the league right now. We're a ways away from that, but even to get into that next tier of like where Denver or Houston or the Lakers are at right now, where you could credibly consider yourselves to be like the second tier down level contenders or something like that.
Turn an ankle contender, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not going to be the Thunder kind of turn an ankle, because they could probably survive that, but that's generally the tier.
There's pretty much only one player on the Thunder that it seems like that a turned ankle would matter for.
I'm not even sure SGA, they could not survive. They honestly might be able to. They're so deep. Anyway.
I don't know.
I want to cry.
That's
Maybe.
an interesting question.
It is. But one thing that could change Boston's future is a star shaking loose, or a high-level role player shaking loose unexpectedly.
Sure.
Our guest for this pod, Ti Windisch, agrees with us, I think, pretty strongly that it's not going to be Giannis Antetokounmpo. He did talk about how there would be the possibility of maybe like an Anthony Simons being involved in a trade that Giannis is in, without him coming back to Boston, obviously. But we were talking off air also about the fact that, just like the luxury tax, and also in the last pod, that it's not super likely that star power is going to be added to this version of the team. It's possible, but unlikely. How are you seeing the whole Giannis situation unfolding, and how do you think it will end up, if at all, affecting Boston?
So I think it will definitely affect Boston. Obviously, first and foremost, if he's traded to an Eastern Conference rival, that will of course affect Boston, just by virtue of having Giannis on a more competitive team in their own conference. The two names that keep coming up for the East are the New York Knicks and the Miami Heat. Both of those would be obviously dependent on the package, but Giannis on both of those teams would be a problem for the Celtics. I think there's no other way to slice it. It would be much more dangerous to have him on either one of those teams than in Milwaukee. I particularly would really not like to go up against Bam Adebayo and Giannis front court. That sounds like a really bad time for everybody involved. Now, Miami would have to give up a whole lot to get him, but you have to think that with Spoelstra, the infrastructure, with the likelihood that the plan is to pair Bam and Giannis together, not to trade one of them for the other, you would have to think that that team is going to, at the very least, be a monster defensive team and a super physical, difficult matchup every single time. That would not be fun. If Giannis goes to the Knicks, similar deal. Jalen Brunson and Giannis would be a serious pairing. That would elevate them as a contender. There's pretty much no other way to set that. Even if the fit is maybe not necessarily the cleanest, which I think you can argue. I just think in the NBA, talent outweighs fit pretty much every time. You're almost always going to win if you have if you have just overwhelming talent. Now, fit is important because, like we've seen overwhelmingly talented teams fall apart before, the Phoenix Suns being the most recent example. But for the most part, if you have the talent will figure itself out. So Giannis on either one of those teams would be a huge problem for Boston. Now, that being said, so go ahead. Yeah.
The Hawks and the Pistons were teams those are the only teams in the East that Ti sounded, as him being like kind of like a face for Bucks fandom / Bucks thinking, as teams they would be interested in the East, with maybe the Rockets out West being another team
in terms
that's
of
realistic.
the Bucks. Yeah, so I
being
think,
interested in the return realistically, basically.
So I think it's interesting because it's still hard to gauge how much control the Bucks ultimately have over where Giannis is going to land. If he comes out and says, I want to go to New York, I want to go to Miami, by all accounts, it seems like the Bucks are going to work with him on that. If he's more open to the idea of playing for an Atlanta or a Pistons, a team that he could legitimately try and win the title on this year or next year, which I think would be the case.
And if he's pushing, like you would think that's what he wants, but that's not necessarily always the case.
But for those returns, I mean, the Atlanta Hawks would probably be the best fit in the conference in terms of not only being able to still facilitate a very strong winning team around him, but being able to offer the Bucks a return that they could actually translate into something. They have a ton of young players. I personally do not think they are going to trade Jalen Johnson at this point. To me, that feels I understand you have to give up something to get something with Giannis, but to me, it feels like Jalen Johnson is pretty set in stone in the Hawks' future. But, they have a bunch of other young guys, Dyson Daniels, Onyeka Okongwu, the Zachary Risachet, former number 1 pick. Like, these are all guys that could factor into a Giannis trade package. Obviously, they have the big Trae Young outgoing salary, and I don't think Trae Young would necessarily be like, you can make the argument that you just keep Trae Young and try to pair him with Giannis, or you could trade him to Milwaukee, and I still think he's a valuable piece that could then net some assets. Yeah, he would put butts in seats, and I think he would net assets in return as well. So I think you could, all this is to say, the Hawks probably have the most realistic path to constructing a trade that satisfies everyone, that gets Giannis to a team that could actually contend with him, and that gets the Bucks, pieces that they could actually use, at least as far as the East teams go. I am a little dubious that Houston will ultimately pull the trigger on a Giannis trade, because it feels like they will have to give up one of Amen Thompson or Alperen Şengün to do so, and I just don't see a world in which they would want to do that.
Definitely not. You could get me to think about and big think about Thompson, but even then, I'm leaning towards no as well, just because his calf. This is not the Giannis of old. Yes, he's a top 5 player, but he might be a top 100 player if things go bad, and we've seen they could.
And they already got a big swing off in Kevin Durant. They're playing pretty darn well. And I feel like with the potential trajectory that Amen Thompson is on, it would be really hard to give him up unless you feel like you are for sure winning the title.
And the Thunder are there,
and the Thunder are so good that I have to wonder if that is in their calculus. If it would be,
you might as well just wait. Yeah. See what you can do now. Get some experience.
Exactly. Yeah. The only other teams that I can think of. So you mentioned the Pistons. I don't love the fit, if I'm being perfecally honest.
Or the return, unless you're getting Duren back, and they're not trading Duren.
And they're not trading Duren. Exactly. Yeah, that's not happening. So I think, sure, if you can trade Giannis for Tobias Harris and Jaden Ivey and a bunch of outgoing salary, great. But why would Milwaukee do that, frankly?
Either side would probably not be thrilled with that outcome, honestly. I'm not entirely convinced that it would be the right decision for them.
Yeah. So the one team that that we haven't talked about that I could definitely see a pathway to, and I'm not going to include Golden State in this because they just don't have the assets. It's just not going to happen. Why would you take Draymond Green back for Giannis at this point? That's infeasible completely. The only other team that is, I think, worth mentioning is San Antonio.
It won't. And not in season anyway. Maybe if it got to the off season, but not in season.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Especially too, because if Wembanyama is just going to be a top 5 player, then it's like you don't really need to go for it. I could see a world in which they say pick one of Castle or Harper. You don't get both. You only get one. And then Devin Vassell and a bunch of outgoing salary to make it work. I could see a world where that happens. and where the Spurs could then really vault into instant contender status. But it just doesn't seem like a very Spurs move. Now, we'll see how the rest of the season goes. To me, it really feels like the Heat are in an incredibly promising position for trading for Giannis. My thinking is this: Tyler Hero, Milwaukee native. That's one thing that you could have to, kind of bring fans back in. He's also young. He's on a movable contract. I think there's a real chance there that Tyler Hero would be viewed as a positive acquisition. Khalil Ware would have to be in this deal, but that guy is really promising as a potential.
He's going to be really good. And he's not a great fit next to Bam. He might become a good fit, but he is not yet.
Not right now. So the Heat, for everything for the Heat comes down to, will the NBA allow them to trade Terry Rozier's outgoing salary? If the answer to that question is yes, which by all accounts it seems like it will be, then to me it feels like, of the teams that are realistically in a position where they should go for it and where they have a package that will satisfy Milwaukee, it feels like the Heat are the closest. I think if Atlanta wants it, they could get in there, but I'm wondering if Giannis would put his thumb on the scale and say, I would actually not like to be traded to Atlanta. I could see that for sure.
I could too.
But yeah, so those two jump out. The Knicks, he clearly wants to go to the Knicks based on everything that we've heard. The package doesn't seem all that feasible to me, not without a third team at least, because you'd have to trade Towns. I think you'd probably have to also have a decent amount of other assets attached to that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure they would not be able to send Towns and Anunoby straight up for Giannis. They might be able to, but I think Towns makes too much money. And so I think what you probably have to do is send Anunoby to a third team for additional assets that would then be rerouted to Milwaukee for Giannis. And that feels complicated, because then you need to find a team that's going to give up, like, presumably a decent young player and at least one first round pick. That's probably the minimum price for OG Anunoby. And
I think
I
the
don't know
third,
yeah,
the complicated deal structure is how it's going to play out. Sam Vecini on the Game Theory was talking about our favorite East option that just didn't seem very realistic because of the poison pill, that being Paolo Banchero with the Orlando Magic. He says he has come up with a trade. He didn't, if I recall correctly, say what it was, which I would love to know what that would be. But something really left field, I think, is going to come up to get this trade done, because he is too good of a player. If they really are going to trade him this season, he's too good of a player for someone to not trade for him.
Right.
But at the same time, just for all the reasons we just went through, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a straight up 1-for-1 team trade. It's going to have to be more complicated than that, I think.
That's very unlikely. And, again, if the Knicks are going to go for Giannis, which I think, I can totally understand why they would want to do that, especially given the pressure for them to win the title in the next 2 years, basically. I could absolutely see it, but they need to find a team that is going to give up a good young player and some draft equity for OG Anunoby and his contract. You would think OG Anunoby is a good player. Don't get me wrong. I think he would add a lot to, like, a team that's trying to win the title. I don't see a whole lot of teams that are trying to win the title and have the right mix of assets that they could go out and get.
All the contenders do not have movable first round picks except for parachutes.
Exactly. And he makes a decent chunk of change. OG Anunoby's a fairly expensive player, so it would not be the easiest thing in the world to trade for him. And the teams that would be the most interested and the most likely to use a player like OG Anunoby likely don't have the assets to make a serious move for him. So it'll be interesting. I mean, we'll see what happens. The vibe in Milwaukee does not seem good, and it still feels like it's now more likely than not that Giannis will be traded. But I think it's going to be awfully hard for him to get to his desired destination of the New York Knicks, or supposedly desired destination, unless he basically puts his thumb on the scale and says, you're trading me to the Knicks. And then Milwaukee, by all accounts, will probably do that.
Any other thoughts on the Giannis drama, the Bucks game, or any other stuff we've been talking about?
Kind of tangential to that. I do want to just go on a brief rant here, because I was crashing out in DMs to y'all earlier today about this, but I just can't stand this new CBA, man. I find it to be incredibly frustrating, and I think that it's actually to some degree achieving the opposite effect of what it was intended to.
There's parity for everyone but one team, which is not fair.
Exactly. That's the thing. So the new CBA was designed explicitly with the goal of creating artificially enforced parity, right? They didn't want to have a Golden State Warriors scenario where one team gets lucky with a cap spike and then suddenly they've got Durant and Curry and, 4 all-stars and they're just unstoppable. Well, here's the thing. What they didn't consider in the crafting of this new CBA is that Sam Presti has been hoarding draft picks like smog with a cave full of gold and assets. It's true. Well, so now we're in this
Barrel Rider.
We're in this position where the OKC Thunder are the defending champs. They have, at a minimum, the second best player in the NBA, maybe the best player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, as well as 2 young all-star potential, or in Jalen Williams' case, literal all-star, like all NBA level guys in J-Dub and Chet, and a rotation of stacked, incredibly good defensive veterans, Lou Dort, Alex Caruso. We don't need to go over all this. But then to add into the fact that they are literally 24-1 to start the NBA season. They have 1 stupid loss to Portland. And then on top of that, the fact that as of today, as of this recording, if the lottery odds bear out the way they're supposed to, the Thunder will have a top 2 pick in a draft class that is supposed to have 6 guys that are clearly better than everyone else. And the fact that they also seem to have the infinite draft pick replacement backfill thing. They can just pull an Ajay Mitchell out of nowhere. They can just make these things happen. All this is to say, the Thunder are set up for an incredibly long and successful run here. And the irony of the new CBA is that when you're talking about the kind of trades that you would need to make if you're a presumed contender to challenge a team like the Thunder right now,
they're
are
basically
functionally impossible if you have the level of salary that most teams need in order to be a contender. If you
it can be done, but it's like the tiniest needle to thread.
It's the tiniest needle to thread possible. If you have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, that's 2 max salaries. That makes it nearly impossible. Super max salaries, mind you, makes it nearly impossible to trade for a 3rd star. If you have Nikola Jokic making the 3rd highest salary in the league, along with Jamal Murray and Aaron Gordon, it's almost impossible to trade for a player that will seriously upgrade your team enough to challenge a team like OKC. So in a brutal and ironic twist of fate, the parity CBA that was supposed to bring parity to the league seems to have brought parity to, as you said, every team except for one, this seemingly invincible Thunder team. And, stuff happens, players get injured, fatigue, all that stuff. I grant you all of that. But right now we're staring down a world in which the CBA is actively hampering other would-be contenders from getting to that next level. And the Thunder are gliding above all because Sam Presti has the infinite draft pick glitch set where you can just get a lottery pick every year and keep restocking the coffers. Who is going to catch this team in this CBA environment? I have no idea. And I think it was incredibly short-sighted of the league and of the owners to make this CBA that punitive, knowing that Sam Presti was on the precipice of something truly horrifying.
It's almost as if this new CBA was more designed to institute a hard cap to save the owners money than it is to restore competitive balance. But hey, that's a whole different podcast, huh?
To save one last point on this, to save money and also to save face, because I view primarily the motivating factor behind this CBA as being giving owners of teams who have done a poor job building a basketball team an easy out,
Gotta blow it up. What can we say? The
we
penalties
gotta
are
blow
too
it up.
severe.
The penalties are too severe. Yeah, sorry, the second apron, our hands are tied. We're the Levine and DeMar DeRozan contracts are just too big. It's like what it is it's a back end bailout plan for the worst ownership groups in the league, not to build their teams to be better, but to avoid accountability for the fact that they have not done a good job building their teams. And it's dragging all the other teams except for the Thunder down with them. Rant over.
It could just be our conspiracy theory addled minds worrying about this, but it looks that way, and that in itself is a problem.
Yep. Anyway, that's all I got, JQ.
All right. Well, you know how we get out of here. Something to remember. I'll model it for you because you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm sure.
Do it.
Being a co-host.
Right. Definitely.
Something to remember is the Divine Sweater, Alex's band, is really good, and you should listen to that.
That would be lovely.
He always talks about it as kind of like a throw in on what he's doing, where you can find his work. And let me just say, it's a hell of a lot better than stuff we churn out on a lot of nights. So listen to it.
Well, thank you, Justin. I appreciate that. And something for you to remember, folks, is that your dear co-host, Justin Quinn, here is not just a podcaster. He's not just the guy who's running this particular episode of the pod. He's also a pretty prolific writer. He writes for Celtics blogs. He writes for Celtics Wire, and he writes for a number of other publications on basketball. But in addition to this, there's a reason we call him Dr. Justin Quinn, and that's because he is a PhD anthropologist with writings in many other respects outside the field of basketball. And if you are interested in anthropology, or if you just like some interesting social science work generally, you should just check out his stuff there and pay him money for it.
That'd be cool. No one else does. Academia, ain't no money in it.
No.
Crazy, right?
Doesn't work. Anyway, thanks, Justin. We'll talk to you later, dear listener.